Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. Folks, as many of you know that listen to the show, you understand that I try to focus on the personal bank concept, the first show of the week, and the second one I try to take a bigger picture view of things. You know, the economy and the politics or whatever it is may be going on, things that affect our economy, the economics of our lives, you know, our ability to make money, earn it, grow it, keep it, pass it on, right? And what I want to talk about, so if you missed the previous show, I'm really going to encourage you to go to yourpersonalbank.com. Actually, it's a really good one. I talk about a lot of the reasons why people don't do the Your Personal Bank concept after looking into it. So it might help someone actually understand it further, just looking at it from the other side of the coin, the devil's advocate side, right? Anyway, what I really want to talk about today is, and I'm going to say this much, I really debated, should I discuss this or not? And the thing that I want to discuss is, I know our 4th of July, Independence Day is past. It went by, you know, a little while ago. I like to contemplate and think about things. I don't like to necessarily respond or react immediately when I see something, both good or bad for that matter. I really like to chew on it a little bit. And the thing that I found bothersome was some of the responses and the tweets and the messages and various things that revolved around Independence Day, and particularly those, well, actually both. There were some very positive ones, and of course, if you paid any attention at all, you know there were some very negative ones. And in both cases, by some very prominent people and not so prominent folks. The thing I find bothersome, and I felt like, well, let me put it this way. Why I decided to bring it up, and, you know, it's some are going to agree and some are going to disagree. I totally get that. And you know what? You have the right to disagree. In fact, I served in the U.S. military. Part of the reason why was to protect that right, that freedom that you have to disagree. And I'll support that, whether I agree with you or not. So that it's okay with me. You're not going to offend me if you don't happen to agree with me. But what I am going to say is this. I do want you to at least consider or think a little bit about why you feel the way you do. You know, if you're positive to this country of ours, there's typically reasons behind it. And if you're negative to it, also, likewise, there are significant reasons behind it. Look, we're all influenced by people in our lives growing up. When we're younger, typically it's parents or family members, people like that. A little bit later, it might be teachers or professors. Could be coworkers or later on coworkers or supervisors. People, you know, there's pastors, there's counselors, there's coaches. Okay, there's myriad number of folks that can have an influence in our lives. And those influences can tend to be stronger when we're younger. We're more impressionable when we're younger. That's human nature. Okay. And you got to understand maybe some of the reasons why you feel the way you do about how you feel. And I think being unapologetic about it, if your feelings are well considered, not attacking others, I think that's immature. But standing up for your values and your beliefs, I think is important. And my influences, I've shared this with if others have, you know, I'm first generation. My dad escaped from the Soviets from Hungary. I'm half Hungarian. I was born here. Obviously, that had a major impact or influence on my life. When you can talk to anyone who's an immigrant or a first generation, I'm talking about legal immigrants, folks who made the decision to leave somewhere else, and to come here, whether it was for opportunity or avoid persecution, like my dad, or both. Most of those folks, vast majority of those folks, have a far different view of our country, far more positive, by the way, in many cases, than the typical folks here. And the reason is, you know, like my dad, it had a major impact on my life. He risked his life to get here so that he could have a better life himself, escape communism, which he viewed as persecution. In fact, he was a young adult in the army, didn't particularly want to be there, but it's not like communism gives you a lot of options. And he wanted to go to college, and they would not let him. He had no opportunity. He felt like he was boxed in and had no opportunities in his life. And, here's somebody who's still, well, frankly, a teenager. I think he was about 19 at the time. That's got to be a horrible feeling when you think about it. You're only 19 years old. You've got pretty much your whole life ahead of you, and your options are dictated to you of what you're basically going to do, whether you like it or not. And that's communism, folks. My dad lived it. My dad escaped from it. When the uprising in 1956 happened, he took advantage of that opportunity to get away. He literally walked across the entire country. He was stationed in the eastern portion of the country, of Hungary, and walked the length of the country to cross the border in Austria to get away from it all. He didn't ride the trains and other public transportation like that, like many people did, for fear of being caught. So it worked, obviously. He got away. Those kinds of experiences that you or someone close to you has had in your family has dramatic impacts on your view of things. So do I believe in this country in terms of a land of opportunity that you can accomplish what you want to accomplish? Yes, with every fiber of my being. And no amount of discussion or influence or propaganda or anything for that matter, frankly, is going to change my opinion on that. Someone with a different experience growing up or whatnot obviously could feel much different. Part of the reason why I served in the military, to maintain these freedoms. I understood that people fought and died and have done so throughout the history of our country to protect the freedoms that we have. And I honor that. I was a musician. I played taps at military funerals. Folks, if you haven't had the opportunity to be involved in something like that firsthand, I'm going to tell you it's a very emotionally charged experience. So you can well imagine as a young adult, I'm seeing this firsthand, being part of these types of events. And they have a significant impact on how you feel, how you think, and how you view life. Look, do I believe our country is perfect? Far from it. No country is perfect because we got people in it, right? People aren't perfect. But the ideals that our country stands for, I do firmly believe in, and we have been a beacon of opportunity and a beacon of hope for the longest time. Well, over 200 years. And I find it, frankly, offensive when people attack that. Now, again, I'll support their right to do so, but I don't believe they have the right to influence younger generations. I don't believe teachers, for example, our education system or anything like that, has the right to indoctrinate kids into a different view. I know this is emotionally charged stuff, but here's the thing. We have to have some pride in our country and who we are and what we're trying to accomplish. In fact, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people attack the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution because it wasn't perfect, because it had things like in it like slaves. The thing is, it was a work in progress. That's the thing that a lot of those people miss. It was a major leap forward. Much like Neil Armstrong talked about on the moon, one small step for man, but a giant leap for mankind. That's what our founding of our country was. No, it wasn't perfect. Women didn't have the right to vote. There was still slavery. Those things still existed. But the idea, here's the thing, if you don't realize this, please do check a little bit of real history, not revised history. I recommend looking at history books written prior to World War II, folks. Here's the thing. If you look at the world at the time, Slavery was rampant throughout the entire world. I'm talking about the time of the founding of our country. Slavery was the norm, not the exception, pretty much around the world. Women voting, I don't think it existed anywhere at that time. That would have been a beyond radical idea at the time. But what's awesome about our country was by setting those ideals, it's really the ideals that we strive for, that all men are created equal. And that statement means really, if you read it and understand the meaning, not just don't look at the surface, understand the meaning behind it, what Jefferson was writing is all mankind, all human beings are created equal. Think about that a minute. What a radical statement for a Southern plantation slave owner to make. He was basically reputing his entire livelihood. He was going against everything that he was. How powerful is that? I mean, how humbling is that to do? How many people would repudiate everything they've done for their entire lives and probably maybe generations before? Think about that a minute. That was a dramatic, radical statement to make at that time. It was striving for a higher ideal. And over time, we have moved closer and closer to those ideals. Yes, it took far too long for women to gain the vote, in my opinion, but that's looking at things from a 21st century viewpoint. When you go back, you realize how radical of an idea that was. So why is this so important? It has to do with the future of our country, the viewpoint of what we're going to be as a country and what we're going to be able to do individually, economically, for ourselves, for our families, our ability to make money, earn it, keep it, and pass it on to next generations. I mean, can anyone honestly say to me that they believe that they'll be financially better off with a socialistic system, or a fascist system, or a communist system, or any other system for that matter than the one we have had for the last 200 plus years? See, if you want to succeed and take advantage of opportunities, you got to have the ability to have the freedoms to do it. And we have a group of people who are, in my opinion, in the minority, but very loudly trying to change that. Stay tuned in the next segment. We're going to talk about further and what we can do to protect our freedoms. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. Today, I'm really talking about our country as it stands now, where it's been, and where it's headed potentially, and how that is going to impact our ability to live our lives, to make money, grow money, keep it, pass it on to the next generation, protect ourselves, live our lives like many of us have been gotten used to, for far too long. I'm bringing this up because our economic freedoms are at risk. This is a money-focused show, and economic freedom is part of our freedoms. It's one of our key. It's in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you look it up in the Federalist Papers and the writings of Jefferson and the other founders, there was discussion about the pursuit of happiness being defined as the pursuit of, or the ability to own property. It was very much an economic and at least a partially economic term is the meaning behind it. Understanding these things is key. And see, normally I would say, if you're not a fan of what's going on right now and you want to change the direction of our government, for example, the next elections, just vote in a different slate of folks and then go about your business. And normally that has been the case for my lifetime, certainly for the last number of decades. But something different has been going on in the last few years that it's been very quietly and very diligently. We have what I would consider, there's many people call different names, but it's a very different view of what our country, our society, and what our government should look like. It's basically a view of government should be in control of everything. Government is the center of life. And that can be defined as socialist. It can be defined as fascist, communist, whatever you want to call it, or any variation of any of those things, where people basically look to and rely on the government for, well, just about everything. It requires pretty much an obliteration of freedoms and all the different freedoms that we have. I stated in the first segment, do you truly believe that your economic future, your ability to earn and keep and pass on money and all that will be more favorable if you are living in a socialist or fascist or communist type of government scenario? In other words, if the government is doing more, here's the thing you need to understand. They're taking more to accomplish it. And they have to. It's math, folks. The government doesn't have any money. So where do they get it? Well, they either take it in terms of taxes or they print more. Well, if they take, because they want and need to do more, or the people request them to do more or allow them to do more, they're going to take more to make it happen. Perfect example, I've shared this before. I've had long conversations with many Europeans. I'm half Hungarian myself. I've been in Europe a number of times. I even have family that still lives there. So I have some knowledge on this. And I encourage anybody, if you don't know a European personally, you should get to know one. They're nice people, don't get me wrong. But the way they live is far different than the way we live. I want to use the example of the husband and wife, 2 kids. They lived in Vienna, Austria. He was a sales manager of a successful company that made parts for Volvo. His income, 110,000 euros a year. Much higher than the average income. So he's an upper management type person. So most would consider doing well. His taxes, I asked him about that. He said, well, he said, well, it's 45%. And I said, and I kind of responded, surprised. I knew it was high, but I was like, wow, that seems really high. And he shrugged his shoulders and said, it's what everybody pays. What are you going to do? In other words, they've given up. It's just what they do. So I asked him some more questions. I said, well, what do you get for that? I said, well, I know you get cradle to grave health care. Yes. And I understand you get free education. Yes. Okay, I know those 2 things. What else? What else do you get? They're taking basically half of your income. What else do you get for that? And he and his wife sat there and thought for a while. And folks, they basically couldn't come up with anything else. And that's the standard. That's the norm, folks. And do you realize? And then I said to him, having that healthcare, free education is nice. But man, that seems like that's expensive. I think I could go buy or pay for it a heck of a lot cheaper on my own if I had the option. And they agreed. But they felt stuck. Were they happy? This is funny. We see studies all the time about the happiest countries on earth and various things. And oftentimes you hear about how many of the Scandinavian countries come out oftentimes on top of some of the happiest places to live in the world. Here's the thing, though. When you talk to them, and these are marketing things that are done for various reasons to try to influence people, to make it seem like, oh, everybody there is just happy. I think if you phrased it, in my opinion, if the word they're using is, they're not unhappy, but what the word they're really is saying is, are you satisfied? If they asked them if they were happy versus satisfied, my opinion is it would be far more of them would say they were satisfied more than happy. They're like, yeah, we're satisfied. It's okay. Are we happy? Things could be better. By the way, the same couple I was telling you about made 110,000 euros a year, And the husband and wife both worked. He worked 60, 70 hours a week, typical upper management job, just like any in the U.S. Nothing out of the norm. They lived in a flat, an apartment. They had 2 kids. They had a 3-bedroom flat, no air conditioning, 1 car, 1 small European car, because that's all they could afford. He did get 6 weeks off each summer. They went to a cabin that they had. It was a family cabin in the mountains. But folks, they'd never been outside of Austria. Not that they didn't want to go, and not that they couldn't go. But as he said, it's just so expensive to travel. Folks, they didn't have the money to do it. That's what I want you to understand. They're satisfied. They're not happy. There's a difference. It's a society of dependency versus a society of opportunity. And that strikes directly at the economic impact of each of us individually, again, of our ability to do things that we want to do. Folks, we got to get more involved than we've ever been before, because there's a group out there that want to take that away from you. They're being vocal about it. They're not hiding it anymore. They're wanting to raise taxes. They're wanting to take over more. They're wanting to do more. And when the government wants to do more, that means you get less. It's just that simple. Stay tuned in the next segment. We're going to talk about some of these things further. And again, what are some of the things that we can do? Stay tuned. Welcome back to Your Personal Bank Show. We're talking about the things that we need to do to preserve our freedoms as a country, our economic freedoms, our freedoms in general, our ability to live the lives that we want to live and continue this society, this experiment that started 245 years ago to offer freedom to more people than had ever been offered ever before in history. We are still one of the freest societies in the world and have been throughout history. I saw a study the other day. I thought it was great. They were talking about how a lot of people didn't think that they didn't care for America that much. And they thought the other countries were better. And then the next question, which I thought was really great, they were like, well, what other country do you think would be better? Do you rather live in? What was funny is almost no one came up with an answer. In other words, they just spouted the talking points that this is a bad country for whatever reason. Let's face it, folks. This is being driven by a group of people who politically believe they're going to gain advantage and change our country by gaining control of our country, by getting enough people to divide and be dissatisfied. It's that simple. If you frustrate and upset enough people and you get them to count, you then say, hey, I'll make it better, and they vote for you and put you in charge, you get more power, you get more money, you get more control. That's why they're doing it. We need to be smarter than that. As individuals, as people, not rely on others, not rely on people we don't know, who don't really care about us, okay? I always say this to folks, will anyone ever meet the President of the United States? I have met one president, but I worked in the White House while I was in the U.S. Army. And I met him once while I was there in 3 years. Okay? My point is simple. The vast majority of folks will never meet the president, whoever that may be. Do they really care about you? No. And they can say the same thing about senators, representatives, or anybody else. So stop thinking, oh, this person seems nice, I'll vote for them. They seem great. Now, look at their policies. Are they going to make our country better or worse? Are they going to increase freedoms or reduce freedoms for people? For the ones you've gotten to enjoy so far, is the future? Are we going to get to enjoy those in the future? How about the next generations? That's what I'm saying. What can we do? There's a lot of things. One, get more involved. Right now, if you've got kids in school, boy, folks, I'm going to tell you, this is tough. If you haven't been paying attention to what's going on with critical race theory and the battles and stuff that are going on, and I cheer those parents on that are taking on the fight. Get involved. and find out what are your kids being taught in school while they're there. And if they're not being taught what you think they should be, doesn't follow your values, you're still the parent. It's that simple. You still have the power. Use it. Take charge. Take over. Heck, run for the school board. Run as a school boards should be full of parents, not some professional. That's what most of these school boards, they don't even have kids in their schools. The school board members. They're frankly, they're leftists in many cases. It's amazing how insidious, how consistent and under the radar. Look, I was surprised too. Most people who are, I would consider normal, typical Americans are just they're just raising their families, doing their business, running their businesses, doing their jobs, trying to keep their nose clean, trying to live a good life, peaceful life, and they're not paying attention to a whole lot of these things around us. There's activists, though, who have been very quietly they've taken over Hollywood, they've taken over education, they've taken over media, they've taken over so many different areas of our lives. We've taken over a lot of big corporations. And we're getting surprised now because they've taken over government for the most part, local and national. It's just surprised us because it was like a frog boiling in water. You know, if you want to boil a frog, we've all heard that analogy. You turn up the water very slowly. Eventually, the frog won't jump out of the pan of water. It'll boil the frog. It's the boil a frog approach. If you threw the frog in a hot boiling, you threw him into a bowl of hot water boiling, you jump right out. No, you do a really slow boil, right? That's what's been happening to our country and all these different institutions. You need to start getting yourself involved in those institutions. And if you can't change what's being taught in your school, then pull your kids out of school. There are so many options today, whether it's online school, charter schools, home schools, you name it. Take advantage of one, but don't raise up the neck. Don't allow your kids to be taught what you yourself don't believe in. That's just a recipe for disaster for both you and your kids' future. Parents need to and are starting to take control of this. That's exciting. That's awesome. We're in the majority. Keep pushing. Get involved. Do more. We have to take back all those institutions of our country, or we won't have a country, and we won't have the freedoms we have today. Stay tuned in the next segment. I'm talking more of the bigger picture things of what we can do, so don't miss it. Welcome back to your Personal Bank Show. When we're talking about how do we preserve the freedoms we have, and this is important for our economics too, folks. Are we going to be able to earn, keep, spend, and pass on the money that we work hard for? And what's going on, there's a threat. There's a serious threat to the future of our country, the future of our society. Are we going to be a land of opportunity, an opportunity society that we've been for the most part for the last 245 years? Or are we going to become a dependent society? What can we do? I already talked about what parents can do, and parents have kind of jumped on the front line of this because of critical race theory that's being taught and other things in the schools that do not agree with the vast majority of parents' beliefs, what they don't want their kids taught. And they're jumping in and they're challenging the school boards, and they're doing recall efforts. And I firmly believe many of these school boards will be now in the future be taken over by parents. Frankly, folks, that should have been the case all along. Parents should be on the school boards running the schools and what they want their kids taught, not some leftist elite person who has a very different view of the future of this country, what they would like to see for the future of this country, that the vast majority of us don't want. So get involved. And if you're a parent, whatever, if you can't fight the school board and you're not getting anywhere with that, then pull the kids from the school. There are so many. They don't have to go to the public school. Most places there are charter schools. There's certainly online schools. There's homeschooling. Parents can start work. You know what? We got to start working together. I heard a suggestion. Something may sound radical, but back in the day, when you had pioneer families and there weren't schools, what did they do to teach the kids? For the most part, the moms got together and they started teaching the kids. And maybe one mom took Monday and another took Tuesday and so on. Got to start banding together and working together like that. Or maybe grandparents can step in and start taking over some of the kids' education. Look, it's not that hard. It's hard, but it's not. I have 2 teenage daughters myself, and we started doing that 2 years ago. Okay? Our girls are on online school. We know what they're learning. It's important to us. We can't raise a generation of kids that are not getting taught what they need to learn, for one. I mean, it's no surprise math and science grades and all that, we're far behind as a country, for the most part, than just about anywhere else, any industrialized country in the nation, in the world, I should say. Our kids are not getting taught what they need to be taught to become successful. And even worse, many of them are getting fed indoctrinated with a lot of garbage that the parents don't agree with. So either change it with your school or get your kids out of there and encourage other parents to do the same. Now, work. Folks, here's what I want you to understand. We are in the majority. They call it the silent majority. And the only reason the silent majority doesn't dominate is because they're silent. By speaking up and saying something, are you taking a risk? Yes. Is it worth it? I don't know. I hope so. I hope it's worth it for you. I think it's worth it. I think our country and our way of life and our society and to give people opportunity is worth it. I think this country is worth fighting for. I'm not ready to give up on it yet. And look, I'm walking the walk. I talked about my kids. Guess what? I'm doing the same thing myself. Am I taking a risk, stepping up and sharing with people what I believe publicly on the radio? Absolutely I am. Folks, I'm in sales. I'm in the financial industry. My income relies on people coming to me who want to work with me. And if they don't like me or what I have to stand for or what I say, they're probably not going to reach out to me, right? So am I losing some business as a result? Am I losing some clients as a result? The answer is probably yes. I am absolutely aware of that. Is it worth it? My answer is yes. This country, our way of life, the society, the freedoms that we have are worth fighting for. I'm not the only one. And I've shared with previous shows where I'm excited about the future and what I'm seeing people do and stepping up and saying enough is enough. We need more to join. We need to become an overwhelming chorus of boos, right? We need to stop these people who want to change our very lifestyle, our very way of life, our very society, our government, and everything else in it. And the only way we're going to do that is by the majority, which we are, standing up and not just putting up with it. May you lose a promotion. Yeah, possibly. May you lose your job. Yes. Is the risk worth it? I firmly believe so. I can't answer that for you, but that's something you need to do. Is it better to live your life cowering, submitting, being in fear so you can keep your job, for example? Or is it better to stand up for what you know is right and what you believe in? And maybe others will follow along with you. Heck, maybe you'll find if you do get let go, maybe you'll find a better job. Maybe you go start your own business. I don't know what, but this could be the catalyst to something greater. But you got to stand up and take the risk first. Look, I can't tell you what to do. It's your situation. It's your fight. But to stand up for what you believe in, I'm going to tell you, is empowering. And again, I have clients, by the way, who I like, who I work with, and it's understood we do not agree politically on probably anything. But we still respect each other. And I treat them, if somebody doesn't agree with me, I don't berate them or pick on them. I respect them. I will, when the situation is appropriate, discuss with them my beliefs and why I firmly believe the way I do and why I think they should consider or reconsider their thoughts. But but I'm not going to berate anybody over it or beat them over the head. You know, honey attracts a lot more than what is it? Vinegar, right? So you see my point. There's a lot of things that we can do in our lives. Friends, family. Hey, I've heard a lot of people recently talk about losing friends and family members even over political differences over this past year or so. Look, if you handled it with maturity, like I said, you just don't browbeat somebody. But if you handled the situation with maturity and they chose to shut off communication with you and not become your friend or family member anymore, well, certainly with a friend, were they really a friend in the first place? That's the thing you really need to ask yourself. Or were they just a friend of convenience? We've all had those. So my question really would come back to is, what did you really lose? You lost a friend of convenience. Maybe go find somebody who is more of a true friend. Maybe you have something more in common with. You see my point? To listen or go along with or just allow, I heard to just go along with it and be silent all the time. I guess I'd be like dying a bunch of slow deaths, in my opinion. I couldn't handle that. I wouldn't handle that. I'm not wired that way. And maybe some people are. I get it. But I heard somebody say this once, and I thought not too long ago, and this was very, very powerful. And they were talking about the Holocaust and all those types of things. And they were talking about the Nazis, the way they took over the different countries, and they were able to do what they did, the evil stuff that they did. But the statement they made was interesting. They said they actually, before they took over Poland or any other country for that matter, they first took over Germany. In other words, they had to take over enough of the people in Germany who agreed with them and silence enough of those that didn't to be able to take control and do what they did. The silent majority can be defeated if they stay silent. But the one thing the minority cannot do, they cannot beat the majority if the majority stands up for themselves. And yes, there's bigger things we can do. And we have things like a lot of people are looking forward to the midterm elections next year, for example. But I mentioned local politics, school boards, various things like that. Those things need to be taken back over and taken over by people that, people that love our country and want to maintain the freedoms that we do indeed have and don't want to change everything for their benefit and to the detriment of the majority. Here's the part I also feel really sorry for a lot of people. I feel sorry for the people that are following this, that are listening to this, that actually believe in this, have been, in many cases, indoctrinated into this way of thinking in terms of changing our society to a dependent society. Because the reality is, unless they're part of the elite, which is a very, very, very small number, so most of them are not going to be involved with the elite. Their life is not going to be any better than it is today. And in fact, in many ways will probably be worse, along with the rest of us, unless they start waking up and actually thinking about what they want. What kind of society, what kind of country do they really want to live in? Again, I can speak to this idea of opportunity versus dependence. My dad escaped a communist country to come to the United States because it was the land of opportunity. He wanted something better for himself and his family. I'm first generation as a result. My mom was a school teacher, a retired school teacher, and later in her career, to her credit, taught in a number of inner city schools, both in Missouri and Arizona. She junior high and high schools. She taught in a high school in Kansas City, Missouri, where she was one of 3 white people in the entire school, the entire high school. That was students, teachers, you name it. That was it. And she taught there for several years. One, they paid her better, okay? But it was a lot tougher too. But she would talk about, and I saw it firsthand, I would go visit with her and see what was going on. She also taught on the Navajo Indian Reservation. So the things she would talk about, and I would see firsthand when I went to visit her on various occasions, it was sad to see so many of these kids, these were junior high school kids, that were bright, intelligent, interesting people. But when you talk to them, or you talked about anything about ambition or doing something different or better with their lives, there was a sense of hopelessness. It was like talking to a zombie. They were dead behind the eyes, is the best way I can put it. There are a few exceptions to that rule. Like my first manager I owned a retail plant nursery in Glendale, Arizona. Some of you may have known of it. It's gone today, but it was on 51st Avenue in Peoria. It's called Paradise Nursery. I owned it for several years. And my manager for a couple of those years was full-blooded Kiowa Indian. Great guy, intelligent, smart, ambitious. We would have discussions sometimes about he had grown up on the reservation, left the reservation, of course, and made something better of himself, but talked about how rare it was and how sad it was that so many people got stuck in that cycle of dependency. Folks, I've seen what opportunity can do in my own family. My own dad escaping the Soviets and communism to come to the land of opportunity. And I've seen what the cycle of dependency can do in the inner city and on reservations with the kids that my mom taught. I don't want to see that for our future. So get involved, make a difference, stand up for what you believe in. And as always, stay tuned to the Your Personal Bank Show.